his inauguration, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addressed a country struck by the Great Depression, riddled with poverty and despair. The withered leaves of industrial enterprise lie on every side. Farmers find no markets for their produce. The savings of many years and thousands of families are gone. More important, a host of unemployed citizens face the grim problem of existence, and an equally great number toil with little in return. The Great Depression left 1/4 of the labor force, 15 million people, out of jobs and with little financial security. For every unemployed person, there were dependents who needed to be fed and housed. The U.S. was the only modern industrial country to face a depression without any system of national social security. This results in many people unemployed without any hope of benefits. As the nation rapidly industrialized, the need for something to protect the citizens from future downfall was put into place. Many were skeptical because they had not seen the government in a role to provide aid to them. It was supposed to be helping these families, but it was made by people who didn't struggle during the Depression. Most of the people who benefited most from the act didn't know anything about the proposal. Influential people, though they were not the ones benefiting the most, were the ones to secure the idea into the minds of the weary majority. A new idea had developed in society. The relief of the needy is a responsibility of government at all levels.
I'm John Whitty. I'm the grandson of Edwin E. Whitty. I'm a professor emeritus from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the departments of political science and public affairs. The government really did very little in the United States outside of the military realm. They didn't do much domestically at all. Okay, Roosevelt changed all that, of course, with the New Deal and all the New Deal legislation. He dramatically changed it.
The Social Security Act then became one of the most important pieces of legislation in American history. The New Deal by FDR was intended to provide security against the hazards and vicissitudes of life for the unemployed and elderly. It introduced types of social and economic reforms and established the proposition that the individual had clear-cut rights. The New Deal was the cornerstone of Social Security. However, it could not have been done without Wisconsin. The Wisconsin idea is the concept that government and academic experts should help solve social and economic problems. Hence, the partnership of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the U.S. government. Edwin Whitty, a professor of economics at the UW-Madison, was the father of Social Security. He was proud to have a dual role as an educator and a public servant. Eventually, he was appointed head of the Committee on Economic Security. They went on to write the policy that would come into action to help countless families out of the Depression. Created in 1934, the committee, based out of Washington, D.C., studied the effects of Social Security in Canada and European countries. Its job was to alleviate hazards of old age, unemployment, illness, and dependency.
My grandfather then became the executive director of what they called the executive committee. The executive committee was the writing, they did the work. The big committee met, and they were distinguished. My grandfather was very distinguished too, of course, but they needed somebody to do the work and the work on the actual legislation. So my grandfather's role was to put the legislation together, and then they were very instrumental, he and his team, in getting it through Congress.
On August 14, 1935, the Social Security Act was signed into action by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, with major support from both parties. While presenting the act, it was announced that among our objectives, I place the security of men, women, and children of the nation first. Social Security encompassed all people instead of differentiated groups.
There were 4 acts: disability, unemployment, old age survivors, and then AFDC, Aid for Families with Dependent Children.
The original policy covered aid to the blind, aid to dependent children, old age assistance, maternal and child welfare, public health, and unemployment compensation. The Social Security Board determined proper compensation based on population of state, estimated number of persons covered by state law, and other factors the board found relevant. For maternal and child protection, money is given based on the number of live births in such state. For the average citizen living in 1935, Social Security benefits could provide a modest but stable living for retirees. Money went to services for locating crippled children and for providing medical treatment and care, as well as services for promoting the health of mothers and children were put into rural areas and areas in poverty. It also established and maintained adequate public health services and trained doctors to help with local health work. All these new services that could not be found during the Depression now had government funding. Pensions enabled the elderly to quit working at a time they found fit instead of working until their deaths. The programs in place for children helped those in danger of becoming delinquents.
Downturn in unemployment for a while, but by 1937, it was right up there where it started in 1932. It was at the same level.
The program did not cover anyone 65 or older who was an inmate of a public institution. The first benefits were paid July 1st of 1937. Without the ideals that Wisconsin instilled in Edward Whitty, Social Security would not have become the program it is to help the working class citizens it does today. Social Security represents a major advance in the attainment of economic security for the individual and his family. Security for an individual and his family has three factors: decent homes to reside in, development of the natural resources of the country, and safeguarding against the major misfortunes of life. The Social Security Act focuses on the third factor. Before 1935, there was no relief for extreme poverty, no provisions for people needing to retire, and industrialization and urbanization was negatively affecting the status of many older Americans. The Social Security Act increased the standard of living and helped people out of the Great Depression because the money the Act gave was put back into the economy, thus creating an upward economic cycle. As of 1937, 75% of all public employees in the United States had old age protection.
At the time, I think some people thought the unemployment component of the Social Security Act was more important than old age survivors insurance, which you call now Social Security.
You can divide the history of the program into two sections. The first 40 years of the program were called the expansion period, and then the later years. The Act continues to be amended many times in order to keep up with the ever-changing needs of society. Today, the SSA distributes benefits to nearly 60 million Americans. As Edwin Whitty said in his reflection on the Act, "We have made great progress and, in accordance with our American ideals, will still do better in the future."